Imagine you're living in a world at its absolute peak, and then a shadow falls. In towns and cities across Europe, a single, terrifying question starts to echo through the empty streets and overflowing graveyards. Is this the end of the world? Today, we are talking about the single deadliest pandemic in recorded history, an event that didn't just kill people, it killed an entire era. This was the Black Death.
And you know what? That is not an exaggeration. Think about that for a second. A fever could strike without any warning, then these dark, painful swellings would appear, and within days, sometimes just a few hours, whole families were just gone. It was a kind of terror that seemed to come from nowhere, and it devoured everything in its path.
So to really get a handle on the sheer scale of the devastation, we have to first understand the world that it destroyed. The early 14th century, you see, it wasn't some primitive dark age. No. It was a vibrant, buzzing, interconnected world that was, frankly, on top of its game.
I mean, just look at the incredible optimism of this time. For starters, the climate was warmer, so harvests were amazing, and the population of Europe nearly doubled. Cities like Paris and Florence were absolutely crammed with people, with culture, with trade. You had these breathtaking Gothic cathedrals reaching for the heavens. And connecting it all was this vast trade network called the Pax Mongolia, a kind of medieval World Wide Web that moved everything, spices, silks, ideas, faster than ever before.
But, and this is the absolute key, those very same systems that brought all that wealth and prosperity, the ships, the trade routes, the crowded cities, they had unintentionally built the perfect highway for a global disaster. The world was about to come face to face with an enemy it couldn't see, couldn't comprehend, and had absolutely no way to fight.
And the whole apocalypse, it began thousands of miles away. It started out on the vast, windswept steppes of Central Asia, where this ancient biological killer had been lying dormant for centuries, just waiting for its moment to strike.
So let me introduce you to the villain of our story, Yersinia pestis. It's a bacterium, and it is ruthlessly efficient at what it does. For a long time, it existed in a pretty stable balance with its hosts, rodents like marmots living way out there, far from most people. But that delicate balance? Well, it was about to be completely shattered.
So the big question is, how did it make the jump to humans? Well, it was a deadly chain of events. Sometime in the 1330s, some kind of ecological shift, maybe a drought, pushed these infected rodents closer and closer to human settlements. As the rodents died, their fleas got desperate for a new meal, and they jumped to us. And just like that, the bacterium had found its ride west, hitching a lift along the Silk Road, the great artery of global commerce.
Now, the plague didn't just sort of wander into Europe. No. It was hurled over the walls. Its grand entrance was, believe it or not, a deliberate act of war, one that turned a military conflict into a biological nightmare.
This all brings us to the year 1346 at a trading city called Kaffa. It was being besieged by the Mongol army. Now, the city was holding out, but then the plague started tearing through the Mongol camps. In a moment of sheer desperation and horrific genius, the Mongol commander Johnny Beg, he ordered his soldiers to load the corpses of their own plague-ridden dead onto catapults and fling them into the sea.
You can just imagine the panic inside Kaffa. Genoese merchants scrambled to their ships to escape, but they weren't alone. They were carrying invisible passengers, infected rats, and the fleas that lived on them. And this timeline just shows the terrifying lightning-fast spread. In just 4 years, it had burned its way across the entire continent, from the shores of the Mediterranean all the way to the frozen north.
This quote, wow, it just paints this absolutely horrific picture of what people saw when the first of those refugee ships docked in Messina, Sicily. It was a vision straight out of hell. The authorities, they tried to turn the ships away, but it was already too late. The rats had scurried ashore. The plague had made its landing in Europe.
As the plague spread inland, it wasn't just killing individuals, it was killing society itself. I mean, the very fabric of civilization, law, faith, even family. It all just began to completely unravel under the sheer weight of all this death.
And here's where it gets truly tragic. You look at what they thought was happening versus what was actually happening. The smartest people of the time, they were convinced it was caused by miasma, or bad air, maybe from the planets being aligned wrong. They thought it was God's wrath. So what did they do? They burned incense and advised people not to bathe. Every single thing they tried to do to stop it, based on their knowledge, probably just made it all so much worse.
And the result? Well, the result was a death toll that is still, to this day, almost impossible to wrap your head around. In just a few years, Europe lost as much as half
half of its entire population. I want you to just pause and think about that. Imagine every other person you know suddenly being gone. That was the reality.
The writer Giovanni Boccaccio, he saw all of this firsthand in Florence, and he put it perfectly. The deepest, most sacred human bonds, parent and child, husband and wife, were just snapped in two by pure terror. People would wall up their sick family members inside their own homes. Laws meant nothing. The familiar sounds of a busy city were replaced by this awful, oppressive silence.
So, faced with this complete collapse, society just fractured. You had these extreme, desperate reactions. The flagellants marched through towns whipping themselves bloody, hoping to appease what they thought was an angry god. Others, needing someone to blame, turned on Jewish communities with these horrific massacres, accusing them of poisoning wells. And all the while, as the churchyards overflowed, they had to dig these enormous, anonymous plague pits just to handle the endless tide of the dead. But the story doesn't end in the plague pits. For the people who survived, they woke up in a world that was fundamentally, completely changed. The Black Death didn't just mark the end of a world, it brutally cleared the ground for a new one to grow. So what happened? Well, it's actually a pretty simple case of supply and demand. With so many people gone, there was a massive, desperate labor shortage. And this chart shows you the result perfectly. For the first time in centuries, the peasants, the laborers, they actually held some power. Landowners had to offer them way higher wages and better conditions just to get their fields worked. The old, rigid system of serfdom began to crack and fall apart. The psychological scars, of course, ran incredibly deep, and you can see it in the art. Artists became obsessed with death. This idea of the danse macabre, or the dance of death, became a huge theme. You'd see these paintings of skeletons leading everyone, kings, popes, peasants, all to the same grave. It was this stark, cynical message. In the end, death comes for us all. It's the ultimate equalizer, and all the old certainties of the world were gone for good. And so, that leaves us with this final thought. Empty streets, a fear of the very air you breathe, a civilization pushed to its absolute breaking point. For a long time, we've thought of the Black Death as some distant medieval nightmare. But really, it was a profound test of a civilization's resilience, its science, and its social bonds. And if history teaches us anything, is that those tests, well, they have a way of coming around again.